Welcome to Becoming Spiritual, a podcast about the magic that surrounds us and has always been a part of us. I'm your host, Heather Dolan, a passionate seeker dedicated to bringing together beautiful humans who are doing amazing things in this world. Together, we will explore healing modalities and practical spiritual practices that can enrich your everyday life. We will also hear stories of awakenings, many from people in the corporate world who have broken out of the spiritual closet. Wherever you are in your journey, know you have found a community of open-hearted individuals committed to making themselves and our world a better place. Welcome home. Welcome back to Becoming Spiritual. In today's episode, I sit down with my friend and exceptional QHHT practitioner and gifted channeler, Kristy Wilson. We talk about what it's like to be the subject of a pretty well-known book. She was a hypnosis subject for our friend Sarah Bresman Cosme's new book, A Hypnotist Journey to Avalon, and also her healing journey of how hypnosis has really unlocked a lot of healing for her and how her spiritual path has unfolded over the course of her years and the different milestones that have not only shaped her life, but also contributed to getting her to where she is today. And so I hope you enjoy the conversation. It's fun, but let me share a little bit more about Kristy before we jump in. So Kristy is renowned for her ability to connect deeply with the spiritual realms and facilitate transformative experiences for her clients. Known for her compassionate approach and profound insights, Kristy has helped countless individuals discover healing, self-understanding, and alignment with their true purpose. In addition to her own practice, as I mentioned, Kristy is the subject of Sarah's book, The Hypnotist Journey to Avalon, contributing her unique spiritual gifts and experiences to the exploration of deep-seated wisdom and universal truths. Her work continues to inspire those on a journey of self-discovery and enlightenment. I hope you enjoy the episode. We would love to hear from you. If you have any comments or any feedback for us, please share either in the episode or go to becomingspiritual.me and leave us a comment or feedback. So without further ado, let's jump in and hear what Kristy has to share with all of us. Today, I am very happy to have my friend, Kristy Wilson here, who is known as the Historic Healer. So welcome, Kristy. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
This is going to be so fun. I know we're going to talk about so many things, but first, why don't you tell our audience, how did the Historic Healer come about? What does that mean to you to be the Historic Healer?
So my background originally was in history and philosophy in school. I've always been kind of like into spirituality. I got into philosophy heavily in college just because I had a Catholic school upbringing and I needed a few extra classes to like boost my GPA. So I started taking all these religious classes because it was a easy A. And then I realized there's so much more out there. And then I got exposed to so many different things like the Dead Sea Scrolls and Kabbalah. And I had a really amazing professor who's still teaching to this day, Dr. Kenneth Hansen. I took his course on the history of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I actually have his book right here. He still practices and teaches. And it unfolded this whole new world to me probably like 25 years ago. So I made sure all of my classes, all my history classes were intertwined with some kind of philosophical belief and just kind of kept going down the rabbit hole of history and different aspects, mostly European, mostly the aristocracy and their connections to things like the Dead Sea Scrolls and just different practices in general. And so after college, of course, I was told, okay, it's time to grow up and go get a real big girl job. And I went into teaching for a little bit and absolutely hated it. And then life happened and I put it all on hold and I kind of stepped away from anything spiritual or anything religious or philosophical for like 15 years. And then it all came bubbling up one day, probably about 5 years ago. Of course, a lot of us during the pandemic, we all know we all stopped. And that's when I think there was a shift, or I get the sense there was a shift in humanity and a lot of us started to question and started to see things. And Yeah, and that's what kind of got me back into all of this. Although I've always been attuned since a child to a lot of paranormal and spiritual things around me. But I definitely became more aware when things quieted down and you kind of got a break from the real world to stop and analyze. And it was kind of nice to have that time and to listen to yourself, your intuition. I'm very sensitive to objects around me. This painting behind me is one of my spirit guides, and she came to me in the middle of the pandemic. We bought her. And then I one day was like, am I losing my mind? Like I basically sat there and meditated, had a conversation with her. And
Who is it?
we don't know her name.
What does she refer to herself as?
I refer to her as Lady Llewellyn, and I call her Charlotte Amelia. Being a historian, and so is my partner, we've always collected art. But when she came to us in December of 2019, like January 2020, we found her on an auction, and she sat there, and I'm just like, she has a story to tell. And I just picked up on her story, and I had several psychics come, and I was like, well, what do you pick up on her? And we all got the same thing. So I'm like, okay, like this is interesting.
Wow.
I think like a lot of us during that time when we were able to quiet down, quiet our minds and reflect on a whole lot of things, I think it awoke so much. I'm sure for you as well, Heather. But long story short, I wanted to finally use my degree. I mean, what does one do with a philosophy degree and a humanities history degree? Now I'm finally using it where I take clients back to their own soul's history and to help them heal their present. I never realized how many of my issues I had in this current timeline had to do with karma and tapping into things of my personal past. And then also like healing and hearing the stories of these people that have been gone for, I'm sure she's been gone for over 250 years. And just hearing her story again has healed so much as well, to let you know that your small time on this planet meant a lot to the world. And the effects of someone's life from 250, 300 years ago are still today. I mean, from what we understand, she was an aristocratic woman. She did her job. She gave birth to 3 boys, and then their lineage went on to still see the population of the planet today.
Wow.
Yeah. And then she came to me to help wake me up a little bit. And there's another painting that we acquired during that same time. We actually know who he is. He's John Murdoch. He was actually the teacher to the poet Robert Burns early on. And then after we bought her, we got him. And that's when things really started taking off, where I'm like, out of nowhere, I started like leaving them cups of tea. I'm like, why do I have the urge to do this? And I started leaving him scotch. And then I would get little tidbits. Like we've been trying to research him for probably about 3 years because we think it's a lost work of somebody else. But just going in and reading his history. And, a lot of these people had very tumultuous lives because it was, 250 years ago, standards of living were completely different than today.
Right.
And you had so much going on. You had revolutions going on and things that we can't even imagine happening. So yeah, they lived these aristocratic lives, but at the same time, they were still going through it too. I always joke around. A lot of us just have 21st century first world problems. Like, we can't ever downplay your trauma, but if you ever go into history, it makes you understand what you're going through today.
I love how you're taking that history. I mean, it just obviously planted seeds for where you are now and just all these different journeys and experiences you've had. So I met Kristy, I guess it was 1.5 years ago, right? Maybe at a workshop. So Kristy works with Sarah Bresman Cosme, who is known as a holistic hypnotist. She has a lot of content out there in the world. If you haven't heard of her, definitely go look her up and follow her. She puts lots of things out in the world to be helpful and help humanity heal. And so I got to meet Kristy at a retreat, which was close to my home in Malvern, Pennsylvania. And her and Sarah do multiple of these retreats a year. And so I love how she shared your story about how you came to her. And also there's some of that story in one of Sarah's book, which Kristy is one of the main characters, her information that came through. Yes, thank you. A Hypnotist Journey to Avalon, Sarah's 4th book. So Kristy is Alice. So if you've read that book or if you're going to read it, we'll link it all in the show notes and in the resources page on becomingspiritual.me. But basically, Kristy brought Alice's story to life. It was one of her past lives. And so again, going back to that history, and you give so much detail and richness. You can just really feel like you're in this life with you as you're recalling things with Sarah when you're under hypnosis. So talk a little bit about what that journey looked like for you to meet Sarah and the healing, which put you on this path where now you're doing this work, which I think is so beautiful.
God, it's such a rabbit hole. Like a few years after the pandemic, I was sitting at work one day, and I've worked for the Walt Disney World Company for 25 years now. And it is a very matrix job. And you go in, you do your job, you go home. And I was just at this point where I'm like, there's gotta be something more to this, and starting to get more into my spirituality again and just searching for something. And in my late 20s, I had a lot of medical issues and they were starting to resurface again. And I was just thinking, I'm not going through this again. I had something called Cushing's disease, which was a pituitary tumor that causes, no matter what, excess cortisol, which is your stress hormone, and it just throws off all the hormones of your body. You have the inability to lose weight. Like, I was a marathon runner and I was teaching fitness classes on the side, and I went in for liposuction and could not lose weight. So eventually they found that I had this disease called Cushing's disease, which was a tumor on my pituitary gland, which is your third eye region. And I had it all taken care of. I was in remission from 2012 for about 10 years. And then out of nowhere, it started to come back, where I went in for my annual MRI and they're like, oh, you do have a growth back. And I was noticing that I was starting to gain weight. It wasn't a whole lot, but I'm like, all right, I'm kind of approaching that menopause time anyway. But then they're like, no, we have to get this taken care of. Otherwise, we'll have to take the rest of your pituitary or look into shutting off your adrenal glands. Those are two major glands in your body that I was like, I don't want to go through this again. And then one day I was just kind of a little depressed and I was like doom scrolling at work on my lunch break. And this woman kept popping up talking about Atlantis. Okay, like I'm sitting there on my lunch break. I'm like, I don't want to hear anything about Disney right now. I thought she was talking about a live action Atlantis. And I'm like, Disney, can we do anything original? Like, I kept scrolling, but she kept coming back. And I'm like, what is this woman talking about? Sarah was talking about her book. It had nothing to do with Disney. We just happened to have a film. But in her book, The Hypnotist Journey to Atlantis, she talks about her client named Jen. And Jen also has a third eye tumor. I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay, you have my attention now. And then she's going on and on how she couldn't lose the weight and she had a slew of problems. And then she goes into talking about this past life in Atlantis. And she just starts describing all this flood and destruction. And I'm like, this looks like stuff I've been dreaming about since I was a little kid. So she has me hooked, and I have a job where I'm able to listen to whatever I want. So after the lunch break, I put it in and I listened to like most of the book, the rest of my shift. And I'm like, wow, like I left, and that night I had a series of very profound dreams. And then the next day I finished the book, and then I realized she has a sequel to the book. It's a Hypnotist Journey, Secrets to the Sphinx. And in this book, she's still regressing. This is where it gets confusing. Her client named Jen. And Jen regresses to a girl named Kristy. And I'm like, okay, now the universe has my attention. This woman has a rare tumor in her third eye, and she now regresses to a girl named Kristy. And in Jen's regression of Kristy, she talks about different things that happened to her in a hospital. And one of them was they performed this brain surgery on her. She regresses to a girl that gets a lobotomy, and she's describing the lobotomy. And it's exactly the way that I had to have my brain surgery. I mean, word for word, she's describing how they went through her nose and they removed this part, and how she was fully awake for it with no sedatives. And there was one part of my Cushing's journey where one of the tests, I was strapped to a bed at the Mayo Clinic. It's a rare procedure. So I've got this team of students like staring down at me, and they insert like a tube into me, fully awake, cannot have any sedatives, and plug things into my brain. I know it sounds horrific. It's not as horrible as it sounds, but you're fully awake for this. And the way that she's describing this, and the fact that I went through this in this lifetime, and this woman was just telling her accounts from a past life, and it was spot on how I had to do my things. I was like, okay, is this normal? Like, I know there's a lot of abnormality in the spirituality world, but is this like a common coincidence? And then I look up this author to make sure that all of this is real because it's kind of like, it's far out there. And I saw that Sarah was a real person. And I was like, oh my God, she lives in Florida. I live in Florida. And she happened to be speaking 2 weekends later at a conference. So I get in a car, I go down there. I'm like first in line to like see her speak. And I'm like, okay, she's real. And then I kind of pulled her aside after like she'd done speaking. I was like, is this normal? Like, my name is Kristy. You had this client named Jen with a brain tumor that in real life that regressed to this girl named Kristy that went through all these horrific things. And I went through all of this stuff. And she's like, no, like I kind of got her attention, but she was super busy. And I was like, okay, I see that you have this workshop in the Keys coming up. Should I, like, is it booked? She's like, no, definitely book it. So we go our certain ways. And then that Monday, I go to her website to book the workshop. And I'm a little hesitant to hand over $800 to somebody that you really don't know. And you're like, this is a little out there. And then I found her phone number online, and she does not have her phone number. Sarah does not have her phone number posted on her website. And I call her and she picks up and I retell the story and she's like, no, I think you need to come to this. I was like, okay, I'm just going to think about it and then I'll probably sign up at the end of the day. So I go outside to meditate and then I'm like, where am I going to come up with $800? Because I'm not about to tell my family like any of this because it's a little crazy and it's confusing, as we know. And all of a sudden I look over and in my front yard, there are 2 water jugs full of coins. No idea. I had lived in this house from 2016, and this is in 2023. And I just randomly find in my front yard 2 water jugs full of coins. And I was like, okay. And then I rolled them all within 24 hours and took my time doing it. And then it came out to be the exact amount for the workshop and my accommodations to go to the Keys. And so I booked this workshop and I asked Sarah, I was like, do you have any like one-on-one for some healing? Because I've got some medical issues. She's like, I don't, but you can heal yourself at the workshop. And then a few weeks go by and she's like, I have a cancellation the day before the workshop. I was like, really? And she said, yeah. She's like, it's just a $200 deposit. I give her my $200 deposit. Later that day, I got a Facebook message from somebody in my town that was like, I bought this book from you at a yard sale over the weekend, and there's a card with $200 from your aunt in it. I swear, I have all of the pictures where like I screenshotted all of this because I'm like, no one's going to believe this.
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, universe. So I got in, I gave her the $200. I drive down to the Keys and I have my session with Sarah. And basically, I didn't think I saw anything that great. I started going back and pulling out a life of a woman from about the late 1200s, early 1300s, which was interesting because it's never a period in time that I ever focused on. I usually kind of focused on like the Enlightenment or, the Rococo period, or I was really big into the Edwardian period. Like I never went back to the Plantagenets, which was the dynasty that was in charge of England during the High Middle Ages, they call it. So I start pulling out actual accounts where I was talking about the details of the architecture. What I had never taken an historical architecture class, believe it or not. So I don't know where that information was coming from. And I started pulling out people's names. It had been so long since I really had studied the medieval period. So I don't really even remember who was in charge at that time. And I start pulling out like actual facts and details of all of these people.
And if you read the book, like I said, it's so descriptive. And so you're getting these details of like the dress, the feeling, your feet being cold on the floor, and like so much of it is feeling. And is your initial session any part of the Avalon book, or did that just kind of crack open? Like, okay, so was that your first session with Sarah when you're Alice and you're describing like your wedding dress and stuff?
Right. Like, 'cause I didn't think I was going under. I'm like, I'm making this up. When you go into that state, sometimes your higher self will show you something to relate to it. So being that I work for Disney, all of a sudden I saw the Sleeping Beauty castle and I saw Aurora's dad, like the King Stefan with like the black beard and the crown. And I'm like, I'm just seeing a cartoon. This isn't real. And then all of a sudden, like I start I don't even remember it, but I start pulling out all these details. And if you look at a picture of the king that was in charge at that time, which was Edward I, looks very similar to the cartoon dad of Sleeping Beauty. And
Oh my gosh.
I just start pulling out all of this detail from that time. And like you said, like I could physically feel when I pulled out the life of this little girl. She was a little girl named Alice de Lacy. She was the Countess of Lincoln and Salisbury, and she was married off to King Edward I's nephew at the age of 13, which sounds horrific today, but back then,
That was normal.
it was completely normal, especially for, political alliance. Alice's father was almost like a right-hand man to King Edward I. He was named Protector of the Realm. He was one of the largest land barons in England at the time. She was like the second or third most wealthiest woman. And she had this huge marriage contract with the nephew of the king. And then if anyone knows British history, like it goes into this whole time of chaos and turmoil when she was alive. And I didn't even research any of this history until probably about 6 to 8 months in. And I was like, holy crap, it lined up where this woman, Alice de Lacy, had been kidnapped 3 times and put into prison and had all of this horror. Like she was almost beheaded, but luckily she was wealthy enough where she was able to pay off the crown. I think it was the equivalent of $20 million today to keep her head.
So you have this experience. So this is your first time being hypnotized.
Right.
And so this is through, Sarah's methodology of hypnotizing you. And I've been through it as well. So I've been down to the Keys and had a session with Sarah. And you do very much doubt, like, is this just stuff I'm pulling from, like you said, in my Disney history or a movie or something I read somewhere? And it's so common. And I love that Sarah always sets that up. And I'm sure you do too with clients when you're doing readings of like, no, just go with it. Like whatever's coming through, go with it because it's whatever needs to be seen. And you will be seeing things sometimes that you can relate to so that you can make that connection.
Right.
To share information. But so you go through this session. And then what happens? Because you have the retreat and you're having these health issues. So what is next?
So I was at the middle of the workshop and I went over to Sarah and I was like, I'm sorry, my session was so boring and I probably wasted your time. And she's like, do you want to work together? Because she came to me and she's like, your story is picking up where my last client left off. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, is that common? And she's like, no, it's not. And I'm like, okay. So she's like, can we do another session? She's like, I won't charge you for it. And I was like, sure. She's like, if there's any relative information, do you mind if I use it for a book? I'm like, sure, why not? We started working together and that was like, I guess in May. And then in July, I went for another MRI and the tumor was completely gone. Like it was not visible at all. Now, granted, it is very small and they did different MRIs, but they could not find it. And my labs had gone down where my cortisol was still in like the gray area, but it wasn't super high anymore. And I noticed a lot of changes with myself, like just my diet in general, like things that I liked, I kind of didn't like anymore. Like I used to be a heavy coffee drinker and I just like randomly stopped drinking coffee. And I'd always drink tea as a kid. I was like this old soul where I'd go around drinking tea at the age of 4. And like, I started craving tea again. I used to drink a case of Diet Mountain Dew a week. Like, no, like I haven't touched soda since that session. I had no desire to. I just to get through like some of the stuff I was going through. My partner is a wine collector. So I was drinking probably like we go through 4 bottles of wine in a weekend. Like, and now I'm down to maybe 2 glasses at a time. Like when I drink, like so much of my life, I just had no desire to do it anymore. Like it was amazing to see the changes and the clarity. I mean, I've always suffered with ADHD and I still do very heavily, but there was a little bit more clarity to why my brain just doesn't compute or process as well. So that was kind of like nice to get some answers to things as well. So as I was bringing out Alice's story and using my third eye gifts, I never realized how intuitive I really was, or some of like my dreams that I have were all foreshadowing. And once I started acknowledging like, okay, these gifts, the stuff in my third eye, my pituitary, all kind of went back to normal. And my higher self said we were just trying to get her attention to get this information out. So once I started to get the information out, like it kind of all went away, which was interesting. And just getting Alice's story out.
That was the beginning of unlocking so many things for you, which I love because we hear, honestly, almost everyone on the podcast has a story, not to this degree, but where the universe, source, higher self was trying to say like, hey, I'm here. I need you to listen to me. And most of the time had to really take it to extremes to get someone to listen. And for you to go for this healing, for this tumor that had come back and kind of all the things that you had already gone through, but to have that healing happen so quickly, which is something that you and Sarah talk about in the workshops, is the healing that can happen. And we know even documented with Brian Weiss over his, 50-year probably career. And I've seen him in person. I've heard the stories of people, spontaneous healing, Joe Dispenza, so many stories of it's just sometimes you need to tap into something and then whatever that issue was, I mean, it literally just is gone.
Right.
And it's just our body's ability to do that. It's really the energy. I mean, our body's energy. So it can just change cellularly almost instantly. So the fact that you experience that is just so cool. And so then Sarah invites you to have another session, and lo and behold, it ends up leading to this whole path, which then Kristy ends up being the main subject of Sarah's next book, the Avalon book. And so your story picks up where Jen / Kristy and that life,
right?
which was what, in the 60s? Is that what it was? 60s,
yeah, like 1970. Yeah, was
70s.
Yeah,
okay.
The life that she regressed to as the girl named Kristy, which is about 10 years before I incarnated and before her client Jen incarnated.
Yeah. So many cool parallels. So as Sarah talks about, it was kind of like the universe sent Kristy to her because she was like, okay, what's next? What's going to be the next topic? And here you come and you kind of pick up where you left off. So then you start having regular sessions to share all this information and the stories, which is basically a transcript of Kristy's stories in Avalon. That's how Sarah's books unfold, is really just sharing that knowledge in its true form of how you shared it.
Right. And then to make things even more confusing, once I started going into the life of Alice goes and regresses herself into a whole nother life that was part of her ancestral line that had been like hidden for like millennia. And it's all of the, the secrets of Avalon, which is a whole nother civilization on the same lines as Lemuria or Atlantis, where it's kind of one of those lost civilizations that is it myth or is it real? But Alice started then pulling out all of this information as well. So it's like this onion layered like rabbit hole of I regress to this person, and within the regression, she regresses to this person. And so it does get a little like confusing there, but then I was able to pull out a lot of information that a lot of people will find in mythology almost, and just entire lives of the Fey realms and just things that we are told is make-believe.
Right. When you talked about like the Dead Sea Scrolls and those connections from a spiritual perspective, now it's like this, okay, now I know why you were drawn to all of that information.
Right.
Because,
which like the Dead Sea Scrolls are stuff that's usually like banned from traditional secular religion, and like a lot of the other books, like the Book of Enoch or like the Gospels of Mary Magdalene, like a lot of religious scholars do not consider them part of the actual canons. This information coming through, it's all connected. I mean, there's stuff in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene that was coming out through Alice during that time. And that's one of the few that I had never read at that point. And I'm just like, what is this? Like, why am I seeing all these things? And then of course, I would contact my professor here and there. And I'm like, did this really happen? Like, is this an actual part of the Dead Sea Scrolls? He's like, absolutely. I'm like, okay, interesting. He had his own show for a while called Banned from the Bible on the History Channel. So I think that's why we got along so well. But cool. I would always be, whenever I thought I was making something up, I would send him a little text. Is this in like the academic world anywhere? And he'd give me, okay, it's here, here, and here. And I'm like, that's very similar to what happened in Avalon too. At the end of the day, it's all connected. religion and mythology, it is so intertwined. And it's up to you to discern what you want to believe and what you don't want to believe. And there's always going to be people that, are against anything that you say and think that you're crazy, but just listen to your gut. I mean, there's no concrete evidence of anything, really. Yes, we have these ancient texts, but
it's all what someone wrote down and decided to share in their words, which we know, a lot of traditional books are just one person's perspective and if not agenda. So
exactly. And then think about how many languages things were. Like the languages don't even exist anymore. So how do we translate word for word? So things get lost in translation where one day the word means prostitute, the next day it means goddess. So it's hard to tell the difference, So
it's true. So true.
But just going through and pulling out the details of the life of Alice, and 8 to 9 months in, I started to okay, is this woman really real? And there is very little about her because she was a woman at the time. And of course, women didn't have the rights. And she had gone through a lot where there are some documents saying that she divorced her husband. Others say that they stayed together. Her husband was executed for treason by Edward II. So a lot of documents did get destroyed during that time. So it was hard to pull out, but I was able to go through, actually use my history degree and go through some articles and do some deep diving where I found a lot of the little bits and pieces of things that weren't in the mainstream history about her. I talk about in Sarah's book how Alice gave birth, and in regular history, it shows that she had no children whatsoever. But once I started digging and digging and digging through actual historical documents, and they found a log where they had paid a page or a messenger a tip where he delivered the news of her having a baby. And I was see, I'm not totally crazy. And
we won't ruin who the baby is because it's someone in history that is known. And so it's in the book. So read the book because it's so cool when you're just like, oh my gosh, this is, really amazing.
So that was quite interesting as well. And then, tying it all into my present lifetime, I thought was very interesting. I had a good friend that did an astrology reading, and that basically when he did it, all of my past lives, they basically coincided with Alice's as well. She was born, I think, December 25th, 1281. And when we did the calculations of because they used a different calendar system, and when we calculated, she basically had the same birthday as me in this lifetime. He did my draconian astrology chart, which has to do with your past lives as well. And it usually shows what your Pluto placement is in this life, which in the draconian astrology, my Pluto placement is in Capricorn. And then you look to see where Capricorn was in Pluto all throughout history. And of course, dead center, during the time when Alice was born. I was like, okay, that is interesting. And then I started doing some other digging. There was more historical evidence about her husband's family, who was Thomas of Lancaster. And her father-in-law in that life and my father-in-law in this life have the same exact birthday. And then I started doing some more digging. And this is one of my favorite, where we found a picture of Thomas of Lancaster. And then I found a picture of my significant other, my muggle in this life, and they look exactly alike.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
What are those things that you can't make up? And actually, my partner and I had a trip booked to England before I even met Sarah. So when we got to England, and we had been there, I've always been obsessed with going there. We get there, and as we're landing, my partner breaks out in this red rash all around his neck. And he never has razor burn. And I'm just thinking, okay, I think this is a sign that we've acknowledged our past lives together. And we definitely saw a lot of things while we were there. We visited the prison where we were both imprisoned at. He doesn't believe in any of this. And all of a sudden he's like, I'm not feeling too good. And he goes back to the hotel room, and I stay and I take pictures. And then we both go back to the hotel and fall asleep for 13 hours afterwards. We definitely were feeling the energy. He will never admit that he did, but so the whole time I was in England that time, it was almost like a release and acknowledging. It was a different kind of emotion that I've ever felt. I did not visit her grave. I did find her grave. And someday I just want to make sure I've got all my spirituality in line before I go do that, because I know it's going to be a very powerful and intense to visit your grave at some point. But
Yeah,
that is
I can
one thing
imagine.
that I will be doing probably within the next couple of years. But I just want to just kind of make peace with everything before I go and do it, which
Yeah.
I'm pretty much almost there at this point. So
That sounds like a big soul trip, but healing. So you go through this process and going through hypnosis, have this experience, and then how or when do you decide I actually want to learn to do this for others so that you can bring this healing? Because you've experienced this healing firsthand. You've seen what it's done for all these positive things in your life. What's that like for you?
Sarah, she's kind of like a mentor to me. So she's always encouraging it. She's like, just go take the first class. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. I was just curious to learn more from the technique point of view. What is this process that I'm going through? And I started studying it. And I took the level 1 of the quantum healing hypnosis technique, which is the one that Dolores Cannon kind of came up with. And I started reading it. I'm like, this is kind of a lot of the same stuff that many sects before her had practiced. It's basically the same concepts that you'll find in Kabbalah or Christian mysticism, things that the Rosicrucians did. There was a huge mystical point in the 1500s where even like Elizabeth I employed an astrologer and a lot of mystical people where she would have these experiences. And just unfortunately, by the 1600s, we were all hanged for being witches. And then prior to that, there was a little break there in the 1500s where people were able to study this stuff again. But I was like, this is kind of that same concept. So I see where she's coming from with it. She just kind of put her own modern twist onto it. So I took the very first course and I'm just going out there and I'm like looking for subjects. And then I fell in love with doing it. And then from there, I did find that QHHT is very it's rigid. You have to follow the script. And I've noticed, especially with a lot of my younger clients, they needed a little bit more, or they're already so awake where I could just skip certain parts and just go straight in. So I took all of my knowledge that I learned in my philosophy classes and combined it a little bit with Dolores Cannon's method. And we talked about Brian Weiss. I studied a lot of his stuff. And I know Sarah studied directly under him at one point, but I just started taking different methods and then kind of came up with a little bit of my own where I tailor each session just for every client and use my own intuition and hone in on theirs to guide them to the healing that they need. And same thing, I've seen so many different clients come out. I've put medical doctors under and, I had one recently, her testimonials on my Instagram, and she's a board medical doctor and she had issues in her legs. And I brought her to her higher self. Her higher self said it was ancestral related. I did an ancestral clearing on her and she hasn't had any issues in her legs ever since. After she brought her ancestors forward, we heard her ancestors' story and then, she basically cleared herself on it. And so I just wanted to be able to provide that for other people, like how I was, had the spontaneous healing. And of course, always listen to your doctor and just use this as a side, never stop what your doctors are saying, of course, but, it can't hurt as well to have on the side.
For sure. And so now, as we talked about, you're doing not only past life stuff, but moving into this quantum space too, where you're connecting outside of what's on the earth plane, what we might be able to see and touch in terms of past lives that we've lived, but then going really into the ether and the quantum fields where we're pulling in galactic information and how that can help humanity right now. We know we're in such a big turning point, in this choice point where we have moved into this space where we know there's a better earth coming in terms of what's next for us from a humanity perspective. So can you talk a little bit about the work you're doing?
Yeah. So there's a lot of clients that kind of already know that they've had past lives or, a strong tall tale sign is if you're obsessed with a certain genre of fiction or time in history or place or planetary system, that you've been obsessed with your whole life, it's probably an indicator that you've had a past, parallel, or future life there. Because when you do this work in the quantum field, as you know, all time is the same and everything is happening all at once. So I will guide clients I recently guided somebody that wanted to get in touch with her personal galactic council, and I guided her to get information from them and just to help her in her current life. And she wanted to help humanity as well. And how can she help humanity? Why not ask those that are on the Galactic Council that kind of oversee what's going on in Earth? So we took her there to get her information, and that was amazing. And I don't so much go into the galactic realm so often. Doing this own work, I did find that my soul is an earthbound soul, very tied to the earth kingdom. So a lot of times I attract clients without even advertising it that want to go into the Fey realms or the inner or middle earth realms, where there are a lot of like the things that you'll see in mythology dwelling. So we'll lead them there, and then they'll commune. Like everybody has, just like you have your spirit guides, everybody has like a fairy godmother is a real thing. So you get in contact with them and you meet your Fey guides. And then same thing with your elementals. A lot of people don't realize this, but you are born with your own personal element. Your element of fire, you have your personal salamander, your personal undine of the water element, your personal sylph, and your personal gnome that can help you with different aspects of your life. So I will take them to meet them, and they will get the information that they need from them to help them.
That's so cool. And when you talk about elementals, so for people who might not know what an elemental is, can you give like a minute definition of what an elemental is?
Yeah, the elements are basically the things that you see out in nature, like fire, water, air. Ether is one of them as well, earth. And there's different timelines for everything, as we know. So if anything does not resonate with you with what I'm saying, just remember there are very different timelines throughout. The timeline that I often see is just like how they say, like humans, evolutionized from monkeys or apes or seeded with like ETs. But what I see is the Fae, which are like the fairy kingdoms, like your gnomes, your actual pixies. The evolutionary experience came from the elements. So like the salamanders were born out of the element of fire. The undines were born out of the elements of water. And then there are certain like the Fae types that were like the pixies are an air element, so that they've come out of there, if that makes sense.
And I like how you said that of like, not everyone's going to resonate with everything. We know this. And so I really appreciate how you set that up, because there are, and not to go too deep into this, but there are different timelines that we all have lived on and are converging, and we're creating new timelines with every decision that we make. And so I like that you shared that, because for some people resonate deeply with, for instance, the books and what you've shared in there and what Sarah's put out there, and others are like, oh, well, I've experienced something different. It doesn't make it wrong. It's all our different experiences. And when we realize and we tap into these fields, it's infinite. Literally,
Right.
Our experiences are infinite. And so it is okay that one thing might resonate more than another. And I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, and that your experience is real and other people, their experiences are real. And there's so many stories. You don't have to look very far of people who have tapped into absolutely magnificent healing and have come back to share, you can do this too. This isn't something special I did. We all have this gift. It all just has to believe, you just have to figure out,
Right.
is that part of your time here? Is that what is meant for you here? And I think also the power of the healing you've experienced from sharing your voice and sharing Alice's story. And now I'm sure the work that you're doing and using your voice to help others use their voice and share their stories. Like,
Right.
how powerful. It's like such a powerful circle.
And I think just using your voice, since a lot of this information and a lot of us in general have been shut down for like how many thousands of years on this planet. So it's in our biological DNA, where our ancestors were told to shut all of this down. I mean, a lot of them were persecuted if they even like thought of the ideas of sharing any of this. So I think it's very important to just start practicing using your voice. I know I still to this day struggle with communication. And I know that has to do with a lot of the past lives where I was forced to not talk about things like this. And same with my ancestors. And, even just one of the things that I find the most healing, and a lot of people find it really bizarre is getting my clients while they're under to speak in different light languages. Just using the vibrations and getting those sounds and physically hearing the sounds of those light languages can do so much healing, and it's so liberating for them because a lot of it to the average ear is just going to sound like just gibberish, but it's the vibration. So your soul is hearing that vibration for the first time in a millennia while you're in this incarnation. So I've seen a lot of healing just getting them to scream it out or sing it out. I had one client completely sing me an entire ballad in her light language, and she had a lot of spontaneous healing after. It took a couple months, and then I got a text out of nowhere, except for she's like, that was like the dumbest thing ever. I can't believe I did that. And then 6 months later, I get a text and she's like, I'm finally up speaking in front of people. I'm not afraid to talk anymore. She's like, all of my throat issues have kind of gone away. Like she had this persistent cough since she had COVID. It was all gone.
Wow.
There's no, of course, like actual scientific evidence that had anything to do with it, but
I mean, it's in the proof, the physical proof. And in the end, if it's helping us have a better experience here of joy and love and seeing ourselves as not these small lives, but that we're this collection of our soul and its history and so multifaceted, I think that's the beauty. And if you're able to receive that, I think it can be really powerful.
100%. Another thing I see a lot of male clients, which it breaks my heart, is once they're under, they release by crying. I mean, men for the past, 25,000 years have been taught not to cry or feel emotion. And it's like the one time that they can let go and release, lifetimes of just emotion. And a lot of spontaneous healing for men just done by crying, that whole release, which it's really sad. I know there's a lot that, the men have done to women, and that's a whole rabbit hole for another day. But, and these are macho men that I have put under, like doctors, lawyers, quantum physicists and financial gurus and athletes that are like these big 6-foot men, and they come into your space, and as soon as they're under, they just release. And I'm glad that they have that space, but it's also sad in a sense, like the only time they feel comfortable ever doing that is like, oh, well, I was under hypnosis. Like she was in control. Like they're never going to admit it. Like, and when you are under hypnosis, honestly, the client is in full control. The way I describe it is like when you are driving your car and I'm just simply the GPS. You're like, Siri, get me directions to A, B, and C. I just simply direct them there. They're the ones doing the driving, just like you're the one doing the driving. So you're in full control.
You're just holding that beautiful space for them.
Right. And a lot of people think there's a lot of the, Bugs Bunny cartoons where they're like, oh my God, he hypnotized me. And like, I didn't have control over my body. It's not like that at all. Like I said, 100% full control. And a lot of people don't necessarily always see like a movie screen. You use all of your senses while you're under. So what do you get the sense of? Do you feel like you hear something, or is a picture of a bell coming into your head? Or is there a picture of something else, like just that random thought that just pops in your head? Just go with it.
Yeah. And I'm curious with you, with the detail that you got, because isn't there a specific, I remember Dolores Cannon referenced it, and I remember I had asked Sarah about it and we never got to talk about it, but there's certain people who are almost like more hypnotizable. That's probably not the right word, but where you have this ability to tap into another part of your brain, like the subconscious, where you can pull out these details where not everyone can. I can't remember the name. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about. I don't know what it's actually called. I have seen it in some people. And when we asked my higher self when I was under with Sarah, one of the things they said was one of the reasons for her brain surgery was because, of course, not everybody is going to know every detail, but when they were poking around up there, like it did invoke stuff that opened up this whole realm for me. Like I'm missing parts of my brain now, but then they're also touching other parts. And there's no scientific evidence and we have no idea what exactly the outcomes, but they said one of the reasons for this brain tumor was to get you back in touch with all of your psychic abilities and be able to go into those realms.
Oh, in order to access this stuff, we all have to have brain surgery.
No, not always, but that was like my way of getting there. But
that was your entrance into into it.
into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, everyone has these abilities. It's just a matter of being opened to it and then doing a lot of clearings and healings. People that have had a lot of earth lives where they were persecuted, like for being witches and for communing with the fairies or the gods, and they were persecuted for it. Like a lot of times I will go in and do a clearing for that on them before we get started. And then once that is cleared, they're able to tap into it more. And I set up a very safe environment for them. Like I let them know in advance anything goes at any time and just making your client feel safe. That's why the majority of your time in a session is spent just talking with your client. Like I've had sessions last 8 hours because we sat there and just set up a safe environment and let them have like an unlimited therapy session where they can talk about anything they want. And I think once you make your client feel comfortable and you just do a little clearings before, that's different than Dolores Cannon's method, but I've seen a lot of clients be able to tap in better from that. Also, I know with Dolores Cannon's method, I do practice, and I do only ever practice that one in person. But with some of the other methods that I use, it is online. And I'm finding that clients are going under, better, deeper in the comfort of their own home, in their bed, with their favorite blanket, with their cat next to them. They didn't get in a car and drive to get there and fight traffic and not knowing where they're going. And you're in somebody else's space when you're doing that. And you're in a space where a lot of people have gone through.
Different energy.
Yeah. And I always like energetically clear everything after and before a client. Like I'll strip the bed of everything and just make sure all energy is flushed out. And then a couple times a year, I have a good friend, Mitch Osborne, that comes through and actually does a physical clearing on my house. And he's like, why am I here? It's so protected. It's so clear. You don't need me. I'm like, I know, but it's just like an extra protection. So
yeah. So you have some things coming up. So there is a workshop in Malvern, which we'll put the links to the workshop registration to Sarah's website. Her and Kristy do a lot of these together. So you're going to be in Malvern in November, right?
Yeah.
You'll be up again. Yay. My annual birthday present now to get to see Kristy for my birthday and Sarah. And then Hawaii. You and Sarah are going to Hawaii, right? So what's that retreat for?
That one's going to be like a Lemurian retreat in the beaches of Hawaii. She's rented out a beautiful resort and I believe it's 4 nights. It's on my birthday weekend. It's in January. I think it's January 15th.
A nice way to spend your birthday.
I know. Mine's the 16th. And I've been studying a lot of the Lemurian priestesses. So I've been really called to some of my past lives there, working with the divine feminine priestesses there and just showing how both men and women can connect to that part of their life, working with the elements. There's a lot of fire elementals out in Hawaii, obviously with all the volcanoes there. So tapping into some of those, I'm going to do a whole like volcanic dragon release. So, meeting your own personal dragon and then just erupting anything and letting it flow out like the lava out of a volcano. And I don't know how cold it's going to be, but I also have like a bath ritual that I would love for all of us to just sit in the ocean and just do some healing with that as well. So
that sounds very magical.
And you need to come.
I'd love to. I would love to. And we know, both of us have experienced this, both having been to the retreat. And I just had this conversation with my friend Connie. She leads retreats as well around the space, like how special retreats are because you're surrounded with people who everyone is brought together for a reason. Like we said, these containers are sacred. They are designed by the universe for these people to show up. And if something happens last minute and someone can't come, there's a reason. And then sometimes someone pops in last minute where, Sarah told stories of like, it was sold out. They shouldn't have been able to register. And somehow 2 people were able to register. And she was like, I don't even understand. Like my website, you should not have been able to purchase. Like it was closed. And they were meant to be there. And so it's so beautiful that you're able to be there and participate and teach in these. And I'm guessing there's still healing that happens for you just even being in these containers.
100%. I mean, every time you get into a space like that, you all heal each other. And doing this work, I mean, I've received so much healing from my clients by getting them to release. But it is interesting with the retreats. Like, we do not plan this, but there's always like an underlining theme that we realized by the end. Like, there was one retreat we did in the Keys. Everybody was going through a divorce. We're like, this is interesting. And my good friend Michelle that I met there ended up sitting next to someone that worked for a divorce attorney in Colorado where they both were living. And it was like, wow. Like, it was like one of those things like you couldn't make that up at all. And here they are in the Keys, never met each other a day in their life. And there they are sitting next to each other. And she's telling her story. And she's like, well, I would love to help you, but I'm in Colorado. And Michelle was like, well, that's where my divorce is going on. And it was this beautiful coming together. And then there was, a sad one where a lot of people were going through, I guess, like substance abuse or children with substance abuse. And it just, that was the underlining theme, but they were all able to help each other. And of course, we did not plan it that way. Just, one of my favorite ones it was quite random. We did one with Suzanne Spooner in Jupiter, Florida. And everybody in that group was happily married with 2 kids. And like they all came as couples. It was the only time we had equal men and women at one of these retreats.
Oh, so interesting.
Yeah, we never plan it, and it just turns out that way. So if you come to one of them and you feel called, there's a reasoning for you to connect with those people. So that's the universe calling. So listen to your gut instinct.
And also, I think so many people I hear all the time in the spiritual community are looking for their community. They're looking for their tribe, and they feel like they're shedding a lot of relationships that just don't serve them anymore, that they just don't feel resonate. Maybe they don't have things in common anymore. I know for me, I was just joking actually with our friend Liz that we have in common, that like going and hanging out at someone's house and having wine or going out somewhere to like a bar or a restaurant. At this point, it's like, I just want to sit around and talk about cool stuff that's happened. And like, did you feel this magic and this thing and that thing? And like, that's what lights us up and gives us so much joy. And I could do that all day long. And so naturally, a lot of things are going to fall away that maybe you used to find fun, or now you find like your new ways of joy and sparks. And that's what I think these retreats give, is an opportunity for community to meet some of those people that are like valued, and chances are you're meant to meet and cross paths with. And so I think it's so beautiful to have these containers to allow us to meet our soul tribes.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a safe space. Yep.
And it's a very safe space for sure. And then I know you mentioned that you're also working on your own book.
Yeah, I'm not a writer. I do not enjoy doing it. And I was told that I'm supposed to write all of these books. I'm like, oh, geez. So I started channeling them. Just getting more and more of Alice's story has been coming through my dreams. And I'm like, there's more to this. So I've just started doing sessions with a friend of mine and then recording it. And they're going to put it into a book form for me. So luckily there's a lot of technology. I don't deal with technology very well. They know how to do all of that, but I'm just going to channel through a lot of the information, a lot of it that has to do with some of the divine feminine wisdom that's coming through at this time and how that bleeds into like the kingdoms of Avalon and Atlantis, Lemuria, and all the other ancient civilizations.
So exciting.
Yeah, and just doing more healing for the people of our past and having it help heal our present.
So tell me, as we wrap up, I always love to ask if you have any practical advice to share with the audience around something that either you do every day that can help people, or anything that's just really practical. Obviously, if someone's going to get a reading for some type of past life, or you might not even know what you're going there for. Maybe you just have something that you're struggling with and you're like, okay, maybe I've tried therapy and I've tried medication and it's just not working. I feel like there's something deeper and you can't get to it. Obviously, hypnosis could be a really great modality for sure. Reach out to Kristy, Sarah's booked all the time. So reach out to Kristy, and pretty soon Kristy's going to be booked all the time too. But what would be anything else practical that you would share
just
for the audience?
Attune into your personal elementals. Like go out and spend time in nature. I know that's hard for everyone, especially if you live in a city, but just standing next to a tree, or if you've got houseplants, try to connect with some form of nature, even just water, like just taking a bath and connecting to the water, acknowledging that the water has a consciousness. Yeah. And just sitting in that bath and just asking for direction, and then going within yourself and talking to your personal water elemental. Like say if, your mood is all over the place, water is very emotional. Maybe your water elemental is off balance. Or say if you're having like relationship issues, talk to your personal fire salamander and see what's going on. Like light a fire or just light a candle and just take some time meditating with that candle and take time for yourself. I know it's very hard. A lot of us have families and jobs and, the dishes are still sitting in the sink from last night, but take that 10 minutes and just sit down with one of the elements of nature and just connect. Put your feet on the earth. Sometimes if I'm really feeling off kilter, I'll go outside and just bury my feet into the mud. And as gross as that is sometimes, and I live in Florida, so you never know what's around us. So I just
Don't
take
step
some time.
in weird, strong, water bodies in Florida because
Right.
we don't know what's in there.
Exactly. But, I've got, mud and sand on my property. So I'll just, sometimes just bury my feet in the sand and dirt on the side and just take a moment and just say, can you please give me some clarity on this issue? And listen to the trees, listen to the wind blowing through, and just taking that time to quiet can just help so much. I know it sounds very lame and
It just sounds so simple. I think we all think it has to be complicated, but this is the beautiful thing, is it doesn't.
And the very first thing that pops into your mind, just go with it. And if your second grade teacher pops into your head, it might be a message to go back to something in childhood, and just listen to and like I said, you might not physically hear them, but you'll get the sense, or you'll get a smell that might pass through in the air, and it might trigger some nostalgia that might lead you towards something. But just take the time to commune with the elements is my advice for everyone, at least once a day. The walk from the parking lot where you parked your car to wherever you're going. Just look up to the clouds, feel that, even if there's not a breeze, just feel or take a deep breath in, that's still connecting.
Yeah. Take a moment. I love it. Beautiful. Yeah. How do you figure out your salamander and all those elementals that might be around you? Certainly Kristy can help and guide you in directions. And so we will share all of Kristy's information so that way you can get in touch with her. And I am grateful we could have this chat today. And I feel like we just scratched the surface of sharing part of your story and the healing you've experienced through your hypnosis journey. And now the fact that you're bringing that to others to heal. The exciting thing is there's more to come. There's, you're sharing more information out there, and it's just, I think, the beginning.
Yeah.
But certainly having these spaces, retreats, if it's not the ones that Kristy and Sarah lead, there might be others that are close to you that make more sense. But as Kristy shared, if it's meant to be from a financial perspective, you'll get the signs. It might be things pop up for you. Financially, I don't know if everyone will have money drop right on their lawn for them, but look for the signs that you're supposed to or meant to do something, because the universe is always working for us and trying to help us and support us. So
very much so. Yes.
Well, thank you. I'm so grateful and can't wait for all these other things to come out in the world and to be able to share more soon.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I love hanging out with you. I miss you.
Oh, me too. So thanks for listening. We will share all the resources, like I said, both in the show notes as well as on becomingspiritual.me on the resources tab. So you can find all the stuff about Kristy, the books we mentioned, and then anything else that you want to know, please reach out to us because we want to hear. So if you have questions, we'd love to bring Kristy back to answer them, and any other guests, because we want to be sharing information and resources with you that resonate. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your precious day to listen to our podcast. If this episode resonated with you, we would love for you to share it with someone you love. That would mean the world to us. Also, if you feel called, please follow our show so you will know when a new episode drops. If you want to go one step further, you can even rate this episode, as it allows our podcast to find its way to others. Lastly, we've done our best to share resources that you might find helpful in the show notes, whether that's a book recommendation or a website we referenced during the episode, a free resource, or more information on a guest who took their time to speak with us and share their knowledge. We would love for you to support their work too. You can find more information on our podcast website at becomingspiritual.me. We love you and can't wait for you to hear the next episode. Until then, know you have a place where you are welcome and you are loved. Welcome home.